They thought the storm would silence you, that the chaos they unleashed would bury you beneath the wreckage of your own trust. They underestimated the depth of your silence, mistaking stillness for surrender when in truth, you were sharpening, healing in shadows, building a fortress from every shard they left behind. And now, as the ashes settle and your scars catch the light, they finally see it. You didn't break, you metamorphosed. You are no longer the echo of your past. You are the aftermath. A reckoning carved in resilience, spoken in defiance, stitched together by every moment they tried to erase you. They look at you now and flinch not because you yell, but because you don't need to. Your presence, your calm, your relentless endurance, it terrifies them more than rage ever could. Because you survived what was meant to end you. And in doing so, you became something they cannot comprehend. This is not a comeback. This is the unveiling of who you were always meant to become when everything else was stripped away. And now that you're awake, now that you see them clearly, they can't run far enough to escape the consequences of what they did when they thought you'd stay broken forever. They thought they escaped judgment simply because you didn't scream, because you didn't bleed where they could see. But silence does not mean surrender, it means calculation, observation, mastery of restraint. You watched, you learned, and while they celebrated your downfall, you were building something far more dangerous than revenge: clarity. You see them now, not as the giants they pretended to be, but as the hollow figures they always were. Stripped of the masks they clung to, exposed in the cold light of truth. And that truth, it doesn't shout, it whispers. It crawls. And it stays. Regret doesn't need to be loud to be lethal. It just needs time. And time is no longer on their side. You've risen, not despite the pain but because of it. And now, without even lifting a hand, your existence becomes a mirror they cannot look into without flinching. They wrote you off. They buried you. But they forgot. Some things don't stay buried. They rise, evolved, reborn in the wreckage. And the flames didn't just shape you, they awakened you. They assumed the fire would be your funeral, never realizing it was your rebirth. Every searing moment, every lie, every blade in the back became fuel. And now, you burn, but not in agony. In power, in clarity, in a light so fierce, it scorches everything false and exposes every shadow they once hid behind. You are no longer just a survivor. You are the embodiment of endurance, a monument to what it means to hurt and still rise, eyes sharper, heart heavier but never softer. They gambled on your silence. What they got was a storm wrapped in human form. You were not consumed. You were recreated. They thought they knew your limits, mapped your soul, labeled your silence. They mistook your compliance for weakness, your empathy for fragility. But the person they tried to bend is gone, burned away in the furnace they lit themselves. And in that fire, something else was born, an unrelenting force forged not to please, but to prevail. You are no longer shaped by their expectations. You are a storm rewritten in flesh. a calm that warns of catastrophe. You do not need to raise your voice. Your existence is the warning. They stare now, trying to reconcile who you've become with the version they built in their minds. And they can't. Because that version never stood a chance against the one who endured, who evolved, who emerged. Not broken, but transformed into someone untouchable. Let them tremble. That fear, it's the first honest emotion they've ever felt about you. They thought you were finished. Not because you fell, but because they believed they'd buried you so deep in your own despair that you'd never claw your way back to the surface. They thought the silence they left you in would echo forever. That the blade they twisted into your back would drain you of everything: hope, strength, purpose. You were supposed to collapse. Supposed to fracture under the weight of betrayal so intimate, it felt like venom in your veins. But you didn't collapse. You didn't break. You adapted. There is a kind of pain that strips away everything that isn't real. That burns away illusions, delusions, and every fragile belief you ever held about who was truly by your side. And when that pain hit you raw, sudden, and suffocating, it didn't devour you. No, it forged you. You were on your knees, choking on disbelief, gasping on agony, and still you reached for air. Not the kind that floats in daylight, but the kind buried deep in darkness. You learned to inhale in the places no one was meant to breathe. You learned to find rhythm in silence and stability in the collapse. They don't teach you that kind of survival. You either sink or you become something else entirely. They never considered the second option. They never imagined that betrayal could be a beginning. That pain, when it doesn't kill you, has the terrifying ability to turn you into something relentless. You didn't just learn to survive underwater, you built a kingdom down there. You owned your isolation. You sat with the ghosts, faced every lie, every scar, every part of yourself you'd once hidden from. You stopped running. And in that stillness something awakened. A hunger. A drive so absolute, it no longer needed validation. You stopped waiting for someone to pull you out. You stopped hoping they'd understand. You stared into your own reflection and saw the fragments, the cracks, the damage, the story, and you made peace with it. You didn't ask the world to love who you'd become. You dared it to try and stop you. You became the story they never intended to write. And now, they flinch when they see you. Not because you've become cruel, but because they don't recognize this version of you. You are no longer who they hurt. That person, the one who trusted blindly, who gave too much, who bent over backwards to prove their worth, is gone. What's left is someone who isn't afraid of the dark. Someone who became it. You are not fueled by vengeance. You're powered by truth, by clarity, by the gut-wrenching understanding that no one's coming to save you. And somehow, that's exactly what saved you. You stopped reaching outward. You started rebuilding inward. And brick by jagged brick, you constructed a version of yourself that doesn't chatter when touched, one that absorbs the impact and stands taller for it. They thought you were weak because you felt deeply. They didn't realize the storm they were feeding. Every tear fuel. Every silent night ammunition. Every sleepless hour a sharpening of your resolve. You didn't fall into darkness. You marched into it. And you didn't ask for light. You carried your own fire with you. There's a quiet violence in becoming who you were always meant to be. And you've become unstoppable not because you forgot the pain, but because you let it reshape you. Let it carve truth into your bones, steel into your spine, fire into your blood. You don't walk like someone who survived. You walk like someone who remembers. Every step is a statement. I am still here. But more than that, it's a warning. Because now, the version of you that rose from the ashes is not to be crossed. Not because you are vengeful, but because you see everything. The world didn't break you. It revealed you. And in that revelation, you found power not loud, not boastful, but steady, measured, inevitable. They look at you now and whisper, "What have we done?" But it's too late. You are no longer drowning. You've become the current. They thought they could shape your reality, manipulate the narrative, paint their own intentions as kindness, while driving nails through your back wrapped in a velvet glove. But something inside you cracked open, and it wasn't your weakness. It was your vision. And once the veil dropped, once the illusion shattered, there was no turning back. You don't unsee the truth. You don't go blind once your eyes have adjusted to the darkness. You just see better. And what you saw was wrought. Beneath the charm, beneath the smiles, beneath every carefully curated lie, they were never who they pretended to be. They weren't saviors. They weren't friends. They weren't family. They were takers. Thieves dressed as supporters. Shadows posing as light. And now that you see them for what they are, it's not rage that fills you. It's clarity. The kind that stings like cold water, sudden and shocking but honest. Unfiltered. Real. They believe your silence was ignorance. That your loyalty meant you'd stay blind. But you were never blind, you were trusting. There's a difference. One implies naivete. The other, strength, hope, a willingness to see the best in those who only ever gave you their worst. But that version of you died the moment they mistook your empathy for emptiness. The moment they fed you betrayal with one hand and reached for more with the other. They think they got away with it. Like ghosts escaping through walls. No accountability. No echoes of guilt. But what they don't realize is this. Regret doesn't crash like a wave, it seeps like poison. Slow. Persistent. Inevitable. At night, when the noise fades, when the world grows still, that's when it begins. It starts as a thought they can't push away. A whisper in the dark. A flicker of discomfort they chalk up to nothing until it becomes everything. The weight of what they did. It grows. It always does. And the ones who pretend they feel nothing are often the ones haunted the loudest. Let them wear their masks. Let them fake their peace. Because you know the truth now. Masks slip. And when they finally look into a mirror that doesn't lie, when their own reflection stares back with questions they can't silence, that's when it begins. The slow erosion of whatever self-justification they built. The understanding that what they broke was never theirs to break. And you carry no vengeance. That's the part they'll never understand. You don't need to hunt them down or scream your truth across mountaintops. Your existence thriving, aware, unshaken is punishment enough. You became the very evidence they hoped would disappear. The walking proof that no matter what they did, they couldn't end you. You grew eyes in your scars. And now you walk through the world sharper. Stronger. Not bitter but aware. You don't rage against the past. You let it inform you. Shape your intuition. Guide your silence. The wound they left behind became your compass. And you've been navigating this reality with brutal honesty ever since. Their weight is coming. You don't have to wish it. You don't have to watch for it. Regret is a slow, uninvited guest, and once it arrives it never leaves. And you're done waiting. Because this story doesn't end with revelation, it begins with transformation. They see you now not entirely, but in fractured moments. In the glance of a stranger who carries your stillness. In the sound of a voice that echoes your calm. In a passing silence that once held your presence. And they flinch. Not visibly. Not in a way anyone else would notice. But deep, beneath the facade, in that quiet space where truth has no mask. That's where it stings. At first, they call it coincidence. A trick of the mind. Their pride won't allow them to admit the depth of the absence you've left behind. So they bury it in distraction, new faces, louder places, movements that mimic progress. They fill their days with noise, with chaos, with everything that keeps the truth at bay. Because truth, when you've spent so long constructing your lies, is an avalanche. And they know, even if they won't admit it, they're standing beneath the slope. You were not just someone they lost. You were gravity in a world that floated. You were the weight that kept their emptiness from unraveling completely. They never said it aloud, but they relied on your stillness, your strength, your presence like oxygen. And now, they're gasping in shallow substitutes. They reach without knowing they're reaching. They crave the balance, the safety, the quiet power they try to extinguish. But what haunts them the most isn't your absence, it's what it says about them. That they had something irreplaceable. That they shattered it thinking it would make them feel free. But freedom without substance is hollow, empty. And now everything they try to fill that void with fades quicker than it lands. Nothing lasts. Nothing compares. Because nothing was you. They pretend. That's their first defense. That they're fine. That they've moved on. But cracks are forming. In their words, in their laughter, in the way their eyes drift when they're alone too long. At first, it's a memory. Then a feeling. Then a question they can't shake. What if I was wrong? And from there, the silence starts to stretch and tighten. Regret is slow, but it's precise. It doesn't break the door down, it waits by the window, crawls through the cracks, wraps itself around a spine. Every "I'm fine" they whisper to themselves becomes less convincing. Every new face only casts a brighter light on the one they let go. They try to run, but memory has a longer stride. And you left footprints everywhere. They don't just remember you, they encounter you. In the song they once mocked you for loving. In the scent of something familiar on someone else's coat. In the mirror, when they catch a glimpse of the emptiness behind their smile. You're there, uninvited, unwanted, undeniable. And that's the part that will undo them. Because you never chased them. You never begged. You never retaliated. You disappeared. And in that disappearance, you left behind a silence so loud, it became a mirror. A place where all their masks slip, all their defenses crumble, and what's left is the truth they spent so long denying. They didn't just lose you. They destroyed the only part of themselves that ever felt whole. They'll try to fill that space. They'll try to forget. But forgetting you would require forgetting themselves, because the best parts of who they pretended to be were the reflections they borrowed from you. And one day, when the distractions fade, when the noise dies, when they look around and everything they once thought mattered feels weightless, they'll feel it. The crushing, merciless realization that they didn't just walk away from a person. They walked away from redemption. You were the last pure thing in a world they corrupted. And now that you're gone, they're the architect of their own loneliness. They thought deleting your name from their narrative would erase your impact. That by removing you from their version of the truth, they could unwrite what had already been etched in blood, time, and memory. But stories don't bend to the will of cowards. And yours, it was never theirs to bury. You were the chapter they couldn't control, so they tried to burn the pages. But the thing about ashes is, they linger. They stain everything they touch. And now, every time they retell their life, they must skip over a part that still breathes beneath their words. A hollow pause. A silence too sharp to ignore. That's where you live now, in the spaces they can't fill. They thought by walking away, they'd left you behind. But they didn't walk away, they fled. And what they left behind wasn't ruin, it was reckoning. Because when you love someone deeply, and then betray them ruthlessly, you don't just hurt a person, you fracture yourself. You split your own soul into who you were, and who you became the moment you let them bleed without blinking. They still pretend it never happened. They rehearse lies in their heads. Tell new people a version of events scrubbed clean of their guilt. But time doesn't play along. It unearths. It pulls truths to the surface like bones in shallow graves. And every year that passes, the story unravels a little more. The gaps widen. The lies get harder to maintain. Because the truth they buried is growing roots. You were not erased. You became the shadow that follows them into every quiet room. the name they flinch at in passing, the standard no one else meets. You became the wound they can't touch, the question they can't answer, the silence they can't outrun. They carry you not because they want to, but because they have to. Because in the end, the weight of what they did is heavier than anything they tried to put on you. And still you remain untethered. You could have become bitter. You could have let their absence define you, reduce you. But you didn't. You were built from nothing. From the echo of betrayal and the dust of dreams they tried to crush. And now you stand tall in a life they can't touch, can't follow, can't fake their way into. You became something real in a world where they chose to be hollow. They wrote their own downfall the moment they believed your value was dependent on their recognition. The moment they decided that loyalty was expendable, that truth could be rewritten, that love could be used. And now, every decision they make is haunted by the one they regret the most, letting you go. And what stings more than losing someone is realizing they were the turning point you never recover from. They thought betrayal was the final blow, that if they cracked your ribs wide enough and carved themselves out of your life, they'd leave you hollow, powerless. They imagined themselves walking away clean, as if your collapse was just the aftershock of their departure. But what they never grasped, what they still can't comprehend, is that you didn't collapse. You shed. You didn't lose. You evolved. You let the pain scorch you raw. You let the truth dismantle every soft illusion you'd built to make their presence feel safe. And when all that was left was the bare, ruthless honesty of what had been done to you, you did not flinch. You stood there, in the wreckage of what was, and you chose to survive it. Not gently, not gracefully, but violently, desperately, unapologetically. You became untouchable not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped bleeding for those who drew their strength from watching you suffer. They didn't just betray you. They handed you the final piece of proof you needed. That they were never equipped to carry your soul with care. That they were never meant to walk beside you in your ascent. And now, with every step forward, you're fueled not by anger but by awakening. You're sharper now. Not quick to trust, not easy to sway, but rooted, grounded in who you are. You no longer bend to fit into spaces that couldn't handle your depth. You no longer apologize for seeing through masks. You've stopped seeking comfort in false connections. And that shift, that terrifying clarity, that's what makes you dangerous to them. They're stuck in the past, in a moment where they thought they had the upper hand, replaying scenes in their heads where they were the ones choosing to leave. But what they don't realize is, you let them. Because somewhere deep inside, a part of you knew you needed to be ripped wide open to finally unleash what was always dormant beneath your skin. Your pain wasn't your end. It was your origin story. And now, you exist in a realm they'll never touch. You think differently. Move differently. You don't crave approval. You command space. Your resilience is not armor, it's alchemy. It's the transformation that happens when survival becomes mastery. When scars stop being reminders of pain and start being blueprints of power. And them. They watch from behind the same place they put you. Only now, the view has shifted. You are not the forgotten one. You are not the broken one. You are the proof that they failed. Failed to destroy you. Failed to define you. Failed to predict who you'd become after they left. You are the consequence. And there is no greater revenge than thriving in silence, while those who once thought they held the pen to your story realize they were only ever footnotes in yours. You didn't just rise, you ascended. Unreachable, unshaken, unforgiving in your pursuit of everything they told you you'd never be. They thought your story ended in silence. But this is just the beginning. Every scar is a sentence. Every betrayal, a new verse. And every rise, a triumph carved from the darkest corners of your soul. You didn't come here to be understood. You came to be remembered. This is dark triumphs where survival becomes legacy and pain becomes power. Stay sharp. Stay ruthless. And never forget your darkness was never a weakness. It was your origin. We're just getting started.